Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Valley of the Judged. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have my good brother here in the temple, the master of cursed knowledge, good brother Monarch.
I forget what the name of that parasite that lives in the Nile that crawls up your dick hole is, but that's cursed knowledge.
Uh, yeah. And again, the Nile is the only major river that flows the wrong way compared to every other river. Like, most of them are going to flow downward. It goes upward.
Wait. Not the Nile, it's one of the Amazon rivers that thing lives in, I think.
Yeah, that'd
Yeah,
make
I'm
more
pretty sure that
sense.
one's Amazon.
That'd make more sense because the Amazon is full of things wanting to kill you or poison you.
I mean, you shouldn't be swimming in either of those rivers, to be fair.
At least not without proper protections. But
There is no amount of protection that is getting me in a river that has a parasite that is going to mess with my penis. No amount of protection.
But we are back once again with more of Augusta Universalis, and this time around covering the third pillar. We'll be starting with Imperium and then delving into Mechanica. So this is where we're going to start really getting into the mechanics side of things. So the first part, Imperium, deals with the history of its version of Rome and its control over the Orion Spur cluster of the galaxy. They do have a side note saying, in this chapter, the dating following the names of the Roman emperors always refer to their years of rule and not to their period of life, unless specified otherwise.
Some of this was touched on in the earlier bits when we got into the introduction.
Mm-hmm.
I'm noticing.
Yep. But it looks like, the first part, Historia Universalis, it looks like it is taking place shortly after the Trojan War. Which is, calling Virgil a poet of Imperial Romanism is interesting, since Rome wasn't even established at that point. But it does lead into the chain of events of when Rome was founded. Basically going from the Trojan War all the way to the foundation of Rome in 753 BC. The city was named Rome, and its 7 kings, interesting that they bolded that, succeeded one another on its throne. They included Romulus with his mystical and divine heritage, the diviner Numa, the warrior Tutilis, the last king was deposed by the senatorial aristocracy in the year 244 AUC. AUC is short for Ab Urbe Conditia, or the amount of years after the foundation of Rome. And that ended the empire. The republic rose from its ashes, lasting for 5 centuries. Uh, and it's funny it talks about crushing the Celtic barbarians of the north when Rome's forays into the British Isles were not the most successful, despite constantly throwing people at it.
Let's not focus on the details like that.
Mm-hmm. But alternate history, so you
Yeah,
can get away with certain things.
exactly.
But of course, even with any momentum that they had, um, we are dealing with Rome, so politics undid things. And ev- eventually, we have the point of contacts. This is when the first Augustus, not the first Augustus. This is when the Great Sereth Kingdom, a dominant power in the Orion Spur, had an encounter with humanity. We talked about this about this before. Uh, this led to the First Sereth War and Rome winning, which is part of the thing that amuses the hell out of me. We have aliens coming in who have enough technology for interstellar travel, but still end up losing to people who don't.
What happens when you underestimate somebody?
Mm-hmm. Now, in all fairness, they do say a small interplanetary exploratory mission, meaning I think it's a case where they underestimated what they were dealing with, so they probably didn't send the biggest defense force that they had, thinking, "Oh, this is just some backwater planet. If we throw our weight around, no one's gonna challenge us."
Yeah.
History is the graveyard of ambition. And there have been plenty of times where people have underestimated opposition. Or thought that they just march right through, which that can work for a time, but only for a time. Oh. But I do like that idea of um, of them underestimating the opposition. It's something you see in a lot of those HFY stories, or especially what happens when aliens end up encountering E4s. But no, eventually after the when you have whole whole radical transformations, because um, first learning the steam engine and then learning further industrialization. Um, this also ended the policy of slavery within the empire because it just wasn't practical anymore. And then various phases of missions across the planet and beyond that. And there is quite a bit, and a lot of it we do have to skim just because
This was kind of just more details on what we talked about at the introduction. Like, they got the tech.
Hmm.
They use said tech to kind of just quickly conquer the globe.
Although it's not like it, though. I will make one thing clear. It wasn't like they just steamrolled everything once they discovered how to use alien tech. And there were plenty of conflicts and other Rome-like entities that emerged. But eventually you end up with a somewhat unified Earth under one banner. You just have the big, of course, the I'd imagine that one of the things that helped unify is the fact that it was always known that the same aliens whose ass they kicked that started all this were eventually going to come back with bigger guns.
Yeah.
And nothing unifies people more than having something to shoot at. But then we get to Mechanica, and this is where we're going to get into the main gameplay mechanics. So all events are divided into scenes, the basic unit of time during narration. Oh. We already talked about the 3 unities: unity of time, place, and action. And if any of those unities is interrupted, then that's the end of that scene. But when it comes to the main check, we did cover this, but this is going into a bit more detail. You are adding your a Virtus and a Pertia, and then a 2d6 roll. The threshold is 20, but there are degrees of success, as we talked about. I do like that they say do not perform checks for ordinary actions, so no check for looking at things. I think we've all had that one person who does spot checks every few feet to check for traps, or just to look around.
Yeah.
As if there's a random chance that they cannot use their damn eyes. But obviously after that they go into the consequences of checks and when to perform checks, as well as who chooses the Virtus and Pertia. Short version, the Demiurge or GM chooses it. Then we revisit the degrees of success. So, no matter what, you're shooting for 20. If the check is negative, that's a critical failure. If the check is 0 to 12, that is a failure. If it's 13 to 19, that's a partial result, i.e., you succeed, but or you can have a partial failure. You failed, but. If it's 20 to 25, that's a success. If it's 26 or higher, that is a critical success. And you can get advantages from the Demiurge, or double the Experientia points you would normally earn as a result of the roll. Because this is one of those games where you learn by doing. And when it comes to advantages and complications, advantages are things like additional information, unblocking situations, and so on. Complications might be extra difficulties or the like. There is also the there is also the Fos and Nefos throws. And anytime it's talking about throws, it is basically a dice roll. But if you get a 7 and an 8, that's a second degree Fos. You just add one die. If you get double 8s, you add 2 die. If you get a 1 and 2, you subtract 1 die. If you get double 1s, you subtract 2 die. Or rather, you're rolling an additional die and then adding 1 or 2 to the results. Which, given that, I do wonder if, let's say you get a first degree Fos throw, you roll two extra Fos die. Oh, I don't see anything that says you could stack it. Because if you could, that'd be ridiculous, and it also would be very hard to do. Like, imagine you get a double 8 on the roll. You add 2 Fos die, and then those get double 8s. I don't think you can do that because I think that would skew things a bit too much towards bonus die, as well as the fact that that could get out of hand very quickly.
I will work under the assumption then that that's not really supposed to be happening.
Yeah. As much as I like exploding dice in games, I don't think that's happening here.
Yeah.
And the odds of getting 2d8 as with double 8s is 1.5%. I think that's the reason why you're getting you're getting 2 whole bonus die off of it, because you're not getting that often. We've seen a similar thing with Sword World, where you have exploding die results on damage if you get double 6s, and it keeps going, which might sound a bit insane, but that's boxcars on a straight 2d6 roll. Which, the odds of you getting that are not going to be as much as, say, getting a natural 20 on a d20. Like, the odds of getting a natural 12 is 2.7%, as opposed to a flat 5% on a d20. So it makes sense that criticals in that and the equivalent of criticals in this with Fos would be as powerful as they are. On the other hand, if you got Snake Eyes, it's gonna suck because you're probably if you're rolling 2 die that are going negative. Imagine if those go double 8, and you're probably dealing with a critical failure at that point. So things can get on the crazy side. But then we have Fortunae, which are temporary bonuses and malices assigned. They say assigned to PCs by the narrator. I thought the GM was called the Demiurge in this, not the narrator.
They might have forgotten about that at one point. Because I swear, haven't we read narrator before at some point too?
We probably have, but these are minor bonuses and penalties. The situational one. This could be a temporary weapon. It could be a bonus die or something in between. A Fortuna can last until the Praetorian discards it or until it no longer has a reason to exist, according to the gaming group. A Praetorian cannot possess more than 5 Fortunae at the same time. If he receives a 6th, he must decide whether to give it up or discard one of the old ones. The limitation to apply both positive and negative Fortunae are few, and the Demiurge is the one who creates them from time to time. It is interesting that there's that rule of you can only have 5 of these situational bonuses at once. I think a part of that is the fact that in one of the examples they give, a weapon is used instead of just a dice. But we also have cooperative checks because work together, shared victory, but also shared defeat. But you have one person who's leading. Usually whoever has the highest base value does the check. I feel like they say it is a waste of time for every player to perform a check. I think we've seen that a few times where there's some sort of group check that everyone's doing and everybody has to roll individually.
Yeah.
So that's funny that that's in there. Especially since it was bolded, which means somebody probably had to deal with that quite a bit. It's like in old sports manuals where certain rules are named after people as if to say, and this asshole's why we do it like this. But the other characters can cooperate only if they possess Pertier that are compatible with the action that is going to be performed, excluding arts and virtues. The character who cooperates automatically only provides 1 bonus die, but can use his resources, such as a Guardia, Ordo, or Historia, to further improve the chances before the check is performed. In the case of same action with different virtues, only whoever has the highest base value will attempt the check, everyone else supports. There are some catches. Obviously, a cooperative check needs to have people collaborating to the same goal and bringing their skills into play. If there's a different goal, then that would be resolved with a separate check. And it is worth noting, as mentioned under how to perform checks, that the maximum amount of d8s you can roll is 5. Which, counting the 2 that you get for by default, 2 more that you might get if you roll double 8s, and maybe 1 that you get from a situational bonus. The amount. I appreciate the restraint when it comes to not being able to stack all the bonuses at once in the damn universe.
Especially since the goal's always pretty much hit 20.
Yeah. So and just getting 20 on its own, that's like a 7% chance on 5d8. And if you're trying to get over 20, that's with 5d8 before any modifiers, that's a 64% chance. Uh,
That's actually giving me the impression there's probably going to be a decent amount of failed rolls in this, or you can expect a decent amount of failures on this game if you're not proficient in what you're trying to do. Like, it does suggest not or having characters like actually think about what they do in case their stuff doesn't line up with the actions they want to take.
yeah, well, remember that if you that if you get at least 13, that's a partial success. Which, yeah, that's not great. That's like a, if bonuses notwithstanding, that's like a 9%. That's like a 9% chance. But it's a chance instead of a snowball's chance in hell.
Yeah.
So you do have that going for you, which is nice. But then they go into narration and bonus danger dice. Oh. And although before I get to that, I will note that this means that your choice of Virtus and Pertia, as well as arts, if you don't have that, means no matter what, it's likely you'll be able to get some kind of bonus, even if it may not be as high as it could potentially be.
Yeah.
Virtus and Pertia are basically attribute and skill. If you don't have a Pertia, you have arts as a substitute, which is meant to be broad. So you're getting something. So it's not like you're rolling 2d8 with no bonuses and praying. I think that would be your worst case scenario, in which case you're not going to be succeeding, but maybe you can kind of succeed.
I mean, if you hit the double eights, maybe. It's not impossible.
Even if you hit just a 7 and 8,
yeah.
But that being said, you can get bonus die from the tabula that Praetorians have, so you can get bonuses from your equipment up to a maximum of 3. Because remember, the dice cap at 5. You can narrate how your Guardia, Ordo, Gradium, or Historia helps you out, and for each one that that is applicable, you could get 1 bonus die each, but only once per scene. You can use each anima in a similar way up to twice per scene and get a number of times equal to its level per session to get a bonus die or just a straight +2 to the basic value. You can use each Systema once per scene to get Armamenta and Agatas give +1 bonus die. Instrumenta grant +2 to the effective value, so +2 to the final value you're checking. But that is dependent on what emblems they have. And we're not going to get into... I don't think we'll be getting to emblems this week, but we will be getting into them. On the other hand, if it makes it more difficult, those bonus die turn into danger die. But if you let danger die happen, you do get a missio point. which is a nice touch. Oh,
Have we looked in or seen what the Missio points are for? I don't believe so.
um, those are. Let me double check in a different tab.
Yeah.
Uh, I think we covered them. They were definitely covered in the glossary. I know that. Uh, and Missio is basically the objective that you're doing.
Okay.
So Missio points are. This is something we covered very early on. These are obtained um, by playing well during missions. Um, and can be spent as if they were XP. So you can take danger dice if something might work, if those elements might work against you, and essentially get a little bit of XP out of it. Uh, Now, when it comes to the use of Tracta, you can obtain 1 FOSS die for each of its levels in a related check. However, when you do that, that Tracta remains active, and if you adopt a behavior that goes against it, you get Nefas die of the same level to that check. You cannot activate more than 1 Tractum per scene. And remember, Tracta is the training and cultural features of that character. We kind of covered that with the different ones we saw, and each one had a positive and negative way you could use it. And those sort of things have certainly been in a lot of narrative-leaning games, but a lot of times there's things that are forced on the player. You know, the required behavior for paladins, that kind of thing. Here it seems to be more of you are choosing to lean into this direction, and that is going to give you bonuses, but also penalties. But we are seeing a pattern here. There's a significant amount of opportunities to get more dice. You have a similar thing when it comes to the anime. Where you can either give yourself a flat bonus, an extra die, or a penalty of the equivalent amount. But when you do, you mark one of your experientia points, so basically XP. And you have to establish this before the check. And something that's interesting is the fact that the 3 anime, Logos, Pathos, and Demos are each bound to each other. You increase one, you decrease one of the others. And I do find it interesting that Pathos is capped based on where you are rank wise. but it just has that cap on Pathos, not on the other three. So you could probably just trade it out if you rank up. But if one of them reaches level 10, that is described as performing such an extreme action that is beyond human limits. And once it's at that level, well, congratulations, you're an NPC now. And probably having some massive impact, like, Logos talks about sacrificing one's life to protect Rome, and afterwards, the PCB is treated as a saint. So, getting anime at that level is your exit as a PC. But the different anime, Pathos, Logos, and Demos, can be used in different forms. The mechanics work in the same setup. It's more of what the context is for them. But when it comes to danger dice, first off, you don't have to use them in every single check. Danger dice are capped at 4. And if you manage to succeed in a roll that does have danger dice, that's where you get an extra missio point for every danger dice that was added. It's a case of you're going to be severely penalized, but if you succeed, you're going to get a nice benefit. But with the way that it's used, players do not roll danger dice. The Demiurge does. You roll dice up to a maximum of 4. You keep those with the lowest result up to a maximum of 2 of them. The result of 1 replaces one of the d8s that the player did, but only if the result is lower. The player is to choose which d8 is replaced by the danger dice. On the other hand, if you manage to get a fast throw, you can eliminate danger dice. If you get a 7 and 8, that takes out the lowest one. If you get double 8s, that eliminates all of them. And I think this kind of works alongside the fact that it's very easy to add additional dice for PC rolls, because you're probably going to want to have those extra dice as a cushion if danger dice are rolled. That seems to be the vibe I get out of this. And keep in mind, those fast throws are still giving you the extra dice anyways.
So far, I'll say with this setup, like, this is a, compared to some of the other things we've covered, very straightforward in how, like, it presents this information.
Mm-hmm.
It's been quite easy to follow. It's a pretty simple system. Mm-hmm. Gives you a good amount of leeway, I think is a term I'll use for now, for what you can get away with doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a lot to say like in depth of what we've looked at for how these roles go, but it's not a bad system. It seems quite well put together.
Hmm. Oh, I'd say the only point that might be a stumbling point for some, and keep in mind this is highly situational, so this isn't really a negative or a positive. It's contextual. Is the fact that this is going to lean very heavily on the no, on narration. This isn't a full narrativist game, but with some of the advantages and disadvantages, it is leaning into that.
Surprise, motherfucker!
And hello there, Cuphead. Welcome to the party. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Mildra. I am your one and only gaming monk, and we are covering the core mechanics of Augusta Universalis. Uh, so I think it's interesting that we have a D8 approach when it comes to the system, and I remember beforehand when we were just covering the first chapter, I think you said you were a bit iffy on the danger dice system.
Yeah, now that we actually have some clarification on that and how that's actually going to be working,
Hmm.
I don't think I really have those. I think this has answered those earlier worries.
Yeah. And obviously I can't show it yet, but on the character sheet there's check marks for some of the things that you can activate on that narrative end. And I do like that you can either choose to give yourself a bonus or take a penalty and get XP. This is very, as I mentioned before, this is very much in the vein of games where you're advancing not just by just getting experience and doing the mission, but also by doing tasks. And because that's the main way that you're going to be getting XP in this, I can see why they had said you should only be doing dice rolls if there's a significant risk of consequence. Basically, I don't think they want to have those, those situations where somebody will abuse doing one action just to level it up. And if you've played an Elder Scrolls game, you've seen this a lot. I don't think you can do that here.
That's something I haven't seen too often come up in the TTRPGs we've talked about.
Hmm.
I know it came up in one I played called Prophecy, I believe it was, where in order to level up a skill, like you get a tick every time you use it, but it was a D100 setup.
Hmm.
Now, if you have, say, rank 50 in your skill, if you wanted to get it to 51, you need to use it 50 times.
Yeah, no.
That was what? Ranking anything up in that game was such a painful slog just by the rules.
I know one of the more famous examples I've learned by doing is basic role playing, but even it's not like that. I think I had one variant where depending on build, every time you roll over the skill at the end of session, you'd level that skill up by a certain amount of points. Usually using like anywhere from a D4 to a D8. Oh. And a big part of that is is making it so that there's at least a form of progression. And when it comes to the way Missio and Experientia points work in this, that is something we won't be getting into in detail until we get to the more Demiurge favoring side of the book. But the only way I could potentially see things being simplified is instead of a second degree Foss throw being a 7 and 8, have that be just a single 8. I had thought about for like 5 seconds before I realized if you do that, you're going to see a lot of second degree Foss throws. Maybe too many. So I can see why they took the approach they did, because if it was just 1 8 1 or 2 8s, that's going to spiral into other matters. And no matter what, it's clear that that having a good balance, not a good balance, but a good balance of bonuses is going to be valuable, because since you're trying to shoot for 20, which in that regard is not far removed from Shadow of the Demon Lord, which had a static target number, your stat and skill spread is going to be significantly important. I'd say far more so than in a lot of games where you can, even if you have bad stats, you can still kind of get bailed out by a good dice roll. Could you do something similar here? Technically, yes, but it's not going to happen often.
Yeah.
Like, or you would have to be really, really bad at distributing your points to not get anything out of that 2d8 roll.
Yeah.
And even then, you can still get a partial success, which could certainly help, but that being said, I do think people who, if you've got a background in some of the more flexible narrative-leaning tabletop games, I think you'll take easier to this than if you're not familiar with games that use degrees of success. Because I think a lot of people will look at the 20 and think, oh, this is probably a all or nothing. You either get to 20 or you don't. I do think this would work pretty well with people who are already familiar with fail forward. I think you and I have talked about that concept in the past.
Oh yeah, it's come up a few times in games we've talked about.
Mm-hmm. I do like fail forward because the worst thing that you can do in any tabletop game or video game or whatnot is put players in a situation where they are not making any forward progress. I'll use Halo as an example. This is the reason why everybody who's ever played Combat Evolved hates the library. Because large sections of the library are just you trying to defend yourself against multiple waves of the same kind of enemies. And in just this not very interesting room. Yeah, the library in Halo 2 is an improvement, but it's not hard to improve on garbage. But now, when we come back to this, next week, we will be delving into the next pillar, which, looking at the schedule, is going to be Debello and Demiurge. The Secrets Mysterium part that you're seeing on the screen here, that is something that we're not going to have too much to say on. although I do appreciate the section there of giving a lot of movers and shakers within the setting that can be potential storylines in and of themselves. Yeah, and there's a lot of World of Darkness DNA within this. But when we get to the next chapter, which is going to be De Bello, that is where we're going to actually get into things like combat, as well as some elements on how the armor works. That's also where we're going to get into the emblems. I did kind of hint last week that not last week, 2 weeks ago, that emblems were going to be a big damn deal, and that is very much the case. So do keep an eye out for that. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.